unanimous. So maybe I'll ask the first question. You towards the end you mentioned a couple times about the elevation and the temperature.
Yeah.
I guess I was just like, so when we look and see a contrail is water vapor created in the combustion engine of an airplane, right? And that's going to come out no matter what, just like the exhaust out of a car.
Yes.
Or a scooter. Or us. Not exactly. But that's supposed to dissipate, and the only reason it wouldn't dissipate is that it turns to ice crystals. Is that what you're saying? Can you talk a little bit more about the temperature and elevation, and maybe maybe you could mention where some people talk about how the elevation could change depending on some weather conditions or something like that, or...
Okay, the usual, I'm just going to quote NASA here, because that's basically, on their website they've got a Q&A about contrails, and the question is, how and where are contrails formed? And it says, contrails are human-induced clouds, since they are formed by water vapour condensing and freezing on particles from aeroplane exhaust. Contrails are always made of ice particles due to the very cold temperatures at altitude. Contrails only form at high altitudes, usually above 8 kilometres, where the air is extremely cold, less than 40 degrees C. Now, I've seen, I don't know about you, has anyone seen, it says contrails only form at very high altitudes, where above 8 kilometres, where the air is extremely cold, less than 40 degrees C. Now, I'm pretty sure I can't get a tape measure and measure, but I've seen persistent contrails form at much lower altitudes. I'm sure of it. I don't know what you have.
So regardless, there's no science to support that ice crystals remain in the sky for that long, is there? You know what I mean?
Well, I mean, yeah,
you're talking hours and hours and hours.
That's right. NASA have come up to say that, oh well, now clouds, these contrails can form in the sky and can cover thousands of miles, but they haven't actually explained how. You see, so that's the big smoke up. 15 years ago they didn't, or it was very rare that you'll have one. There are certain conditions, even. I can't, tell you exactly what they are.
I mean, a weather front moving in, or a higher pressure, or lower pressure, or...
Yeah, perhaps related to definitely drops in pressure. But what I can say is that NASA aren't being full honest with you. They're saying, when it comes to fronts, they're saying, they're telling the weatherman, there's a front coming in. The weatherman say, there's a front coming in. And you look on it, it's clouds caused by contrails. So there's no drops in pressure there. There's no rises or drops in pressure. They're not fronts. Why don't we just call it what it is? Artificial clouds, Contrails, like persistent contrails.
I just wanted to mention, because you asked at the beginning of the speech what we remember from our childhood, but then after you started the speech, I guess I wanted to say also that I remember at some point after the 1980s, because the 1980s I remember waiting for the bus as a child and looking up, but sometime in the 1990s I remember actually seeing those kind of things where you'd have a persistent contrail that would spread out, and there was nobody to ask about it. I just thought that it looked weird.
Yeah, I've seen those in my country as well. Now that I remember, and I always wondered, what are these strange clouds? I mean, just huge, lengthy over the whole sky.
And I remember I used to think that must be some sort of pollution.
Mm-hmm.
That was my thought, because I thought I'm pretty sure it came from an airplane, and if I was flying it, a car puts out pollution, so the airplane must be putting out pollution, and that's a freak load of pollution. That was what my mind was thinking when I was 12, 13, 14 years old.
And I was thinking, where do we have an increased number of airplanes flying over the sky? Because before that would be just once in a while you see it, very rarely, but now you would just see these lines passing through the whole sky.
Yeah, that's what the bunkers, the debunking theory says. There's just more planes in the sky. But I think it's just like we're kind of, you know, like if you think about like global warming, like we're how Western governments are like, it's like a crime to deny global warming now, you know what I mean? It's like, oh no, it's definitely happening. And I think the problem is with questioning anything like this, you just get the same response, you know, like, oh, how dare you question? No. It's,
maybe that brings us. Maybe Tom, you could talk about what are maybe the top 5. I hate to say the word debunking, but the people who would disagree with this kind of science. What are the top 5 things that they say, or what is the top 1 thing that they say?
Yeah, I think one of them would. I think the top one is, oh no, they are persistent contrails. They've been, you know, NASA said, oh yeah, they've been around since the 1920s. Wait a minute, jets weren't invented until the 1930s, so I don't know how you can get contrails when there's no jets. I think that's one of the biggest ones is, oh, they are persistent and they occur naturally. But as we've seen in those 2 videos, that, you know, if they're meant to form over 40,000 feet, and there's one that's in the same sky as another one, and one's got a contrail, one hasn't, then there's something seriously wrong there. That's the main thing. And then they say, oh, it's just, don't worry, it's just a contrail. And my feeling, when you said, oh, it's just pollution. Well, contrails on record contain carbon dioxide, water vapor, fine, nitrogen oxides, carbon monoxide, hydrocarbons such as methane, sulfate, soot, and metal particles, basically pollutants. Okay, so whatever way you look at it, it's not healthy. So my feeling is that there will be enough evidence to prove this cut and dry. The problem is that to go up into the atmosphere is a problem because these are unmarked planes, it might be military jets, and who's got the resources to go up there and do the testing? So that's probably the main one there. The main one there is that they're just persistent contrails. Well, if they're persistent, why have they only started to appear since 1989? And it seems like there's an indoctrination process to normalise us to these unnatural clouds, especially with NASA and the schools. I mean, why ask the children? They already know, they can already track these things. There's no need to get the children and to normalise them as if they're natural. So it's very important that we remember and can cross-reference what we was like as children, what it's like now. So the younger generation don't fall for the con, basically, is what it is.
I have one question. I mean, okay, if we see them here in Taiwan and we see them in Europe, for example, the problem with the beef from the US was a big story. Like, we had the corporations, the Taiwan government, for some reason, wants to agree to start importing US beef treated with some chemical, which a lot of people are afraid is dangerous for the health. And in Korea is a big story. There were riots. In Taiwan they've been rioting. Apparently it's gonna pass. Maybe it already passed, I'm not sure. But either way, there was a lot of public outcry regarding that. But for this thing, we haven't heard anything, absolutely anything. I mean, professors of meteorology in Taida, they should know something about this. They would tell the students, I suppose. It's never, I mean, it's not in any mainstream news.
Well, it's not, and that's what we've got to, get it into the mainstream news and get it, seriously examined and, get some more testing done. Let's hope we can, get some definitive evidence to put forward. I think there is pretty much some definitive evidence by now anyway in terms of the tests in the water from Rosalind Peterson in the state of California, the FAA flight paths. I mean, from just narrowing it down to from Mount Shasta, where you don't have really commercial flights fly over there. It just seems like, and just from visual evidence, it seems like there's an elephant in the room, or in the atmosphere. We just got to sort of wake up. Yeah.
Oh, I forgot your name.
Matt.
Matt and I were talking right before about, I feel like everything is sort of comes down to money these days. So I guess my question would be who's, and as when you asked too about it happening, you know, all over the world, like where's the money trail? Like who's benefiting from this? And then that I think would be a way to, you know, following that would be a way to find out why we haven't heard about it too, if that's.
I think the people who are covering it, who are sort of putting disinformation are people who are to benefit. And there's, you know, like you have it's a good question, follow the money, you know, wherever there's money, you know, basically you can follow it down to that. Then the US military, and I think there's documents in the UK as well, have a document called Owning the Weather 2025. And it's owning the weather. So if they want to own the weather by 2025, then surely they'll be doing experiments to try to do that by that time. So we know that the jets are unmarked. If you look up in the sky, you can see for yourselves. I urge you, just, you know, when you see stuff, just keep look in the sky next time. Keep looking at the sky. I've never seen one which has got a commercial insignia on it, in terms of Cathay Pacific or any of these. So I think it's related to some kind of government project, related to a science project where perhaps the scientists are saying, okay, well, they're going to ask us to fix the problem, we better just do some experimentation now. And you know, and there's obviously a lot of money involved, you know, there's chemicals, there's chemical companies. If you do a Google search for chemtrail equipment or geoengineer equipment, it comes with over 1 million hits, over 1 million sort of. So
industry,
it's a big industry. It's a multi-billion-dollar industry. People, you know, will benefit from having some of these what they call global radiation programs, which are pumping stuff into the atmosphere. They're gonna benefit from it. It's already on the table. These ideas are already on the table. It's seriously discussed behind closed doors, and I'm just saying it's happening now. I think it's happening now.
So it seems like something out of a James Bond movie, you know what I mean? But at the end of the day, like if you talk about what they were doing in the 60s, then it's not really that far from the, you know, it's not really that unbelievable. Talk about like, you know, what they were doing in Vietnam.
Yeah.
You know, it's 50 years ago.
Oh, they have the technology to change the course of hurricanes. Like from that guy Ben Livingston, he was the head of that centre, the COVID operation, and I deleted the post, but I can definitely, you know, they do this. They have these black chemicals they put up into it, and it cause, and they, you know, they have, you know, this other thing called HARP, which is HARP is in Alaska. And it's basically, you know, if you ionize, what's happening is when you're putting aluminium and barium up into the atmosphere, you're actually ionizing the atmosphere. And HARP works off frequencies. It stands for High Altitude Oil Research Program, and it's an experimental US military program. They brought the technology from a guy who invented it, who realized he could, if there's a drought in Africa, he can make it rain. He was like, yeah, I can make it rain. And the military said, okay, I'm going to buy that. And then it's all top secret.
Well, they're very hush-hush about it, aren't they?
Yeah, but you know, they work in, here we go, I don't know if they can show you this, but this is hard. So they have this technology to perhaps even control the weather by 2025. And it you know, the military are using this. Now, I think, yeah, it's a research, it's a co-funded project, but basically, if you can say to a country, okay, you don't do what we say, we're going to put a drought in you, or we're going to make it continuously rain. You know, you can basically, it's a warfare weapon. And so there's this situation going on here. It can be used. I don't know if I want to talk too much about HAARP, but it works out in the high ionosphere. So it bounces, it's like based on the Star Wars model. It bounces stuff up into the atmosphere and comes down again. And it's based on Tesla technology, which, you know, Tesla was a pioneer of creating earthquakes, believe it or not, as well. I talked about it in another speech.
I wanted to ask a question. You mentioned briefly about how about Mendocino County,
Yeah.
and how most flights would be, say, flying from San Francisco to Portland, Oregon, and might not. Mendocino County is a large place. It's
Yeah.
there are a number of counties there, Mendocino and Sonoma and whatnot. If a contrail has to be formed over a certain elevation,
Yeah.
and if you were taking, say, the flights from San Francisco to Portland, Oregon, those flights are definitely getting up. They're definitely getting up to that height. They're traveling in a straight line. I don't know that I don't have a map right in front of me, but it seems like they should all be going in one direction, whether that's heading down from Portland or up to Portland from San Francisco.
Yeah.
Not going east-west. If they were going east-west, I don't know where they would be going.
That's
Well, I guess they would be flying from maybe Denver to Hawaii. Right.
That's the point. That's the point of it, because they're going in a straight line. They don't need to pass Mendocino County. So what Rosalind Peterson did is she got all the FAA flight paths of every plane, not just commercial planes, because Mendocino County, like you say, it doesn't get much traffic, you know, in terms of commercial flights, because they need to fly in a straight line from, you know, A to B, San Francisco main hubs, and that's not in Mendocino County. So, but what she did notice was these what's called intra-flights, and intra-flights were they were not commercial flights, and she mapped out all of these intra-flights, and they fly in this sort of semicircle, like this, and those intra-flights were the ones that were covering Mendocino County with persistent contrails. Those were the flights that were unmarked. Those are the flights that are flying in grid patterns.
And it seems like if they're going just a short distance, say 50 to 100 miles, there's no reason that they should get up over 40,000 feet.
Yeah, exactly. They're probably not over 40,000 feet either. So all of these criteria are not ticked to create a contrail anyway. And the fact that they're unmarked planes, is quite sort of worrisome. And I'm not just talking about America. This is happening in all NATO countries. You know, it's England's terrible for these contrails and stuff. And recently in London, it's been getting covered with them. So
I think it's like we talk about elevation and stuff. You know, that sort of side of it. That's a bit regardless, really, because they shouldn't be hanging around for that long anyway. No matter how high they are. What the temperature is, you know, it's just supposed to be ice crystals, right? So it's pretty irrelevant. And the fact is, they just shouldn't be expanding and hanging around for so long. You know what I mean? So
if it's going on, let's hope it's not. But if it is, which it probably could very well be, it's just a nonsense. It's got to stop. You can't put more pollutants up in the atmosphere to stop what was originally a problem with pollution that became climate change, global warming. Anyway, just is madness. So I think, it's just about getting, being a bit vigilant and, so I just ask you to, have a look at the skies. It does happen, and just see if you can remember what it was like when you were a kid to watch these contrails compared to what's happening now. It doesn't happen every day in Taipei. I haven't seen it this week, which is unusual. Mostly it's sort of maybe I don't know, 2 or 3 times a week or something.
Yeah, I think it's one of those things that when you become aware of it, or just like, you know, even if you don't, like me, I'm not convinced on any of the arguments of what it might be, but definitely something weird going on with it. When you're aware of it and you look up more often, you know, you're like, oh yeah, there's one. And you come out of work and it's still there in the sky, you know what I mean? Just expanding out. You know, when you're aware of it, you notice it more often.
Yeah, that's true.
I saw one in Taipei the other day. The plane was, I was actually looking to see, got home, looked out the window to see if there were any trails. Because I live on the 36th floor, so I've got a pretty good view of the whole city. And there was the sun setting, plane was going over, and then there was no trail, and it just started coming out of it. And yeah.
Alex, you wanted to mention something?
I want to ask the cloud seeding.
Yeah.
Do they use planes? I mean, does it look similar to contrails when they do cloud seeding?
Okay, so cloud seeding is a way to, just to give you an insight, it's a way to create weather, you know, create clouds perhaps and make it rain. And it's usually you put particles up. Historically it was silver
Iodide.
Thanks, silver iodide. And but there's various ways to actually put that up into the atmosphere. Not just planes, but you've got jets, small planes, rockets, drones. All of these can and have been used to, and there are companies, you know, it's all unregulated. It's like the wild, wild west out there. You know, all I'm asking is a bit of regulation and a bit of control. We've got to share this atmosphere. What happens here affects something else. And these unregulated, like Rosalind Peterson was talking about, these unregulated cloud seeding operations, you know, they had a very successful one in Wyoming where they made it snow. And they made it snow and it was very successful to create water, you know, in the summer. And then in Texas they had a drought. And so all the Texas farmers are complaining about having these big droughts. So, you know, everything's kind of connected. So let's just have more oversight, more of these experts come in. You can't have these closed conferences where you've got to have every expert, every MWIMOS, every government organisation involved in the decision-making process. And then if they still want to do it, I guess we can, and the public's got to be aware as well, and we can say, do we agree or not? You know.
Yeah, the new generation of airplane would be more fuel efficient. Yeah, for example, it might reduce 30% of gasoline consumption. Do you think it would help to solve this problem?
Well, that's a good point. I mean, perhaps I haven't actually thought about that, but I would think it would be the opposite. I think if they're more fuel efficient, there'll be less contrails. But you know, there'll certainly be less particles. You know, to create a cloud, to make it expand, you have to have these nanoparticles, small particles in it, and then the moisture builds around it. Do you see? So if they're cleaner, I would say the logic is that there'll be less persistent contrails. But that's just my opinion.
Isn't one of the arguments that the trails aren't actually coming from the exhaust of the engine? They actually have these built-in. You've seen pictures of it.
Yeah,
they put these sprayers on the back of the aircraft. So I don't think it might not be an issue.
I think that might have been part of Alex's question. Alex was asking, when they do cloud seeding, does that look like contrails? I mean, have you seen pictures of actual specifically cloud seeding? That was your question, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, I've seen footage of when they did it in the 60s, and it does look like that.
Yeah. Why I asked this question? Because I remember when I was a kid in the early 80s, I saw constant contrails.
Right.
And I was thinking, like, what time was it? Okay, and now I'm sure that it was in the early 80s, and you said that the chemtrails were invented in 1989.
Yeah.
So how do you explain this? If in the early 80s, I saw I don't know if our country had any program about whether we were on a communist regime and this kind of stuff.
Well, Russia and well, definitely the Russians and Chinese have, they've got long-standing cloud seeding programs. That's an interesting point, that you wouldn't normally expect, given the premise that it started in 1989, to see these. They do. Persistent contrails do exist. They are rare, but they were very rare. So I can't answer that question, but it's interesting.
Might be some other program that disappeared.
Could be another program, yeah. It could be another cloud seeding.
So maybe part of it is that persistent contrails may have been possible, for a long time, but they were maybe more rare or something like that, and now they're prevalent to the point where your whole sky gets filled with persistent contrails.
That's right.
But
Yeah.
now that you mention that, I would only see those persistent contrails from military planes. Like I remember those. Sometimes they would pass, sometimes they would put them in different colors for some holidays, but they only came from military planes. I don't remember those.
Yeah, I guess I kind of remember that too, like talking to my parents and saying, where could that plane possibly be flying from? That's not flying from Portland. That's not flying. It's too high to be coming from Portland. It's going in the wrong direction to be coming from blah, blah, blah. Right?
Yeah. Yeah, it could well be another weather experiment, on record. I'll give you a few. Here's NASA particle and chemical release experiments from Ceres. See it? Barium, strontium, lithium, calcium up in the atmosphere. US Navy, NASA charged with aerosol release experiment, CARE 2009. Chaff, is it chaff?
Yeah.
It's basically to deflect missiles when you have these
Just little bits of cardboard and paper, isn't it? Like
Yeah.
You just spit it out the back of the jet and
It's for radar, isn't it?
Yeah, that's it.
radar. They have this stuff.
Pull off radar, I suppose, isn't it? Interfere with it.
And of course, you've got these upper atmospheric experiments going on, with HAARP, which I mentioned earlier, which who knows what they're doing. I think we just got to be a bit more careful with how we're looking after the air. It feels like it's a massive experiment right now, and it just needs a lot more control. And I'm not saying don't experiment. They have. In England, we had experiments in the '60s in the Buckinghamshire. I believe, and it's been going on for a while, and they're always covert, and someone always finds out eventually, and it's always been a negative consequence. So,
Okay, well, unless anyone else has a last question, we can probably end there. Does anyone else have a last question? No? Okay, thanks, Thomas.